In an article last Tuesday, Commonwealth Bank of Australia described how they're using artificial intelligence to change the way you bank. Although you can't see how they're doing it. It is below the surface of the consumer experience. In an article by the bank's Sam Downing, Commonwealth Bank of Australia discussed how the bank's CommBank app, with nearly 10 million users, includes features like Bill Sense and Benefits Finder, which predict expenses and cash flow, along with finding unclaimed benefits and savings. In addition to sifting through reams of documents which humans couldn't understand because, well, quite frankly, reading all those numbers puts us to sleep, the bank's AI underpins scam prevention technology like name check and caller check, which are two features that confirm cash transfers and bank customer service identity. The article described Commonwealth's AI capability as flagship and says that it makes 53 million decisions a day, freeing their very human customer service teams to have more interactions with customers. Coincidentally, at least the chatbot reassured me it was a coincidence, last Tuesday, Zillow also issued a press release discussing artificial intelligence. In particular, their new ChatGPT plugin. The press release indicates this is basically a verbal interface of their real estate database. This tech won't be able to delve into Zillow's 3D home tier features or act on the user's behalf. Or so they say. But I believe as we look at the news, all of us will agree there are certain aspects of our world where artificial intelligence probably couldn't do a worse job than humans are. As Sudan and Ukraine continue to burn, this week watched the world move to a war footing, one toe slide at a time. Last Thursday, Lockheed Martin announced $7 billion of contract awards to produce Javelin anti-tank missiles at the rate of just over 10 a day within a few years. 10 missiles per day does not sound like a lot, but it can be quickly scaled up. The company indicated in a press release exactly 1 year ago that the production facility in Troy, Alabama, has about 600 employees. It wouldn't take long to push that to 1,200. And I'm going to suggest that when one factors in the effectiveness of the Javelin compared to the effectiveness of prior anti-tank weapons, like the M5 anti-tank guns of the Second World War, the recoilless rifles of Vietnam and Korea, and even the venerable TOW missiles, the adjusted production should run more like 25 to 50 systems a day. And the United States is not the only defense bloc boosting its capabilities. Last Wednesday, the European Commission announced it would begin to seriously ramp up ammunition production to supply Ukraine with increased supplies in an implementation of a March 20th plan to provide Ukraine with over 3,000 artillery shells a day. Now, while that's a lot of artillery, nearly approaching some of the barrages of the First and Second World Wars, this is not something that should be lightly dismissed as part of the West's support of Ukraine. It is far from that. Ukraine and the conflict going on there is a test of the Western military supply capabilities for a 20th century style war, not a 21st century style war. General staffs from Washington to Brussels and beyond are asking themselves if their military-industrial complex could support the mud and blood slog we see in Ukraine. And the answers are not reassuring. 1 year ago, the EU issued a document on their defense industrial position, and it called on the continent to close the gap between where they were and where they need to be in case it's Europe in the fight and not their smaller eastern neighbor. While this included $200 billion in continent-wide defense expenditures, there were several even more important goals. This report noted over half of European defense euros are spent on imported arms, many of which have some sort of import control on them. What this means is, for example, if a European fighter jet uses a jet engine that is imported from the United States, there could be some legal limits to who that could be sold to. And I believe we saw this recently as Germany was pressured to allow Leopard tanks to be transferred to Ukraine. The European report emphasized phasing out Soviet-era, quote, legacy systems in favor of interoperability, along the lines of what we've seen with NATO. Curiously enough, the report emphasized main battle tanks, quote, and these are their words, in light of the return of large-scale, high-intensity warfare in Europe, end quote, of the protection of sea lines, of communication, and the importance of space and cyber warfare. The past half-century have been full of wars, but most involving the great powers have either been brief, like the Falklands conflict, or both invasions of Iraq, or they've been long and slow, like the Iran-Iraq War or the wars in the Balkans. The war in Ukraine presents Western powers with an unparalleled opportunity to assess their logistical and manufacturing capability against the possibility of a drawn-out, conventional, peer-to-peer war. Now, last Wednesday, we also saw a defense announcement more in line with the wars of the past 3 decades, as U.S. Air Force Life Cycle Management Center Public Affairs announced the completion of a $38 million support facility at Kanji Air Base in Nigeria to support that nation's 12 A-29 Tucano attack aircraft. This includes mission support and training capabilities at the base. Nigeria is in a strategic location below Chad, Niger, and Mali, and Nigeria is also home to the notorious Boko Haram militants. Although a dozen aircraft may not sound like a lot, in the world of asymmetrical warfare, that's a game changer. The A-29 is not a big airplane, but the Afghan Air Force's A-29s actually replaced their versions of the venerable Mi-24 Hind. Nigeria is key to security not only in the region but also globally, as a substantial amount of Nigerian oil is exported to the U.S., and there's discussion of Nigerian gas exports being pipelined to Europe. That same day saw an announcement in a seemingly more peaceful yet no less important mission also involving aircraft, as California Governor Gavin Newsom reminded his citizens of Wildfire Preparedness Week, which Californians do not take lightly. In a press release, the governor's office listed several ways they were preparing, including nearly $3 billion of forest management, the addition of nearly 1,300 positions at the investment of over $500 million, the treatment of over 100,000 acres, I'm guessing that means cutting out the underbrush, and the addition of 24 aircraft to CAL FIRE's 62 aircraft fleet. And we should all be in prayer for the people in California because their wildfire season can be horrible. And finally, on Friday, the World Health Organization sparked global rejoicing and thanks to the Almighty with its announcement that the COVID-19 health emergency was over. But the same day, the American Chemistry Council reminded us all that COVID-19 is not the only player in the public health game, and did so in a press release reminding us of the role chemical disinfectants play in fighting diseases. Chemical disinfectants are very different. In their press release, they reminded the public of recent outbreaks of C. Auris fungal infections in New York and New Jersey, particularly in health care surroundings. And they provided a link to a list of 37 products the EPA says will kill the fungus. The press release reminds us how chemical disinfectants can keep us safe in public health settings. This is a good time to remind you. Chemical disinfectants are not antibiotics. Germs can develop antibiotic resistance, but chemicals like alcohol and hydrogen peroxide are a totally different game. It would be unwise to say there are no germs left after bleach hits a surface. But bleach-resistant germs do not exist. Alcohol-resistant germs do not exist because of the way alcohol functions. It dehydrates their little outer shells. Couldn't happen to a nicer germ. So, chemical disinfectants are our friend. They're not fun. They're harsh on our skin just as much as the germs. But the American Chemical Council reminds us all they are very, very important.